Hey guys, Hamsterwheel here with a new video, and today I want to check out the parses of Rattleskin Classic once again. Now, a while back I made a video where I compared the tier list, which is what people predicted classes would do, versus the actual numbers that we got from Naxxramas. However, that was early phase 1, so people were mostly in pre-raid bis, and now that Ulduar is, I'd say, pretty close around the corner, it's already live on the PTR. I think it's time to once again look back at the numbers and see how well the classes are doing when we compare early phase 1 to late phase 1. And we'll see if there are any major changes, and spoiler alert, there are some pretty significant changes between the classes. But I'll show you right now, so let's get into it right now. Okay, so how I'm going to do this, I'm going to show you very quickly what the parses look like in early phase 1, and then I'll show you the late phase 1, and I'll show you how the positions of the classes have changed. So right here you have Patchwork, and this is early phase 1, and this right here is late phase 1. And as you can see, Unholy Death Knight is still on the top, and as I said before, I'm going to show you guys the changes. So here you can see the old position per class, the new position, and the change, whether it's positive or negative. Obviously, if they moved up, it's green. If it's red, then it's, they moved down. And if it's a minus, then it means to stay the same. So we can very quickly scan through these parses and see who won and who lost. So, Patchwork has a lot changed. Well, like I said, Unholy Death Knight is still number 1. Affliction Warlock is now number 2. Enhancement Shaman is actually now on number 3. So they are in top 3. They're doing really well late phase 1 in Patchwork. Assassination Rogue is still the same. Demonology Warlock kind of dropped off pretty hard here. They went from number 2 to number 5. Destruction moved up once again. Destruction is kind of the big surprise here from Rattleskin Classic. People really underestimated the Destruction Warlock, but here they are at number 6. And Survival actually moving up, number 7. Arcane Mage number 8, so also really good changes here. However, the Frost DK dropped pretty hard. They're from 6 to 9. Combat Rogue from 7 to 10. And we have a few other losers, the Balance Druid as well. They went from 9 to 12. And way down below we had Subtlety Rogue, which was like number 15, which is kind of like in the middle. And they are now dropping hard to number 19, which is like way down at the bottom. And the absolute bottom is still made up of Retribution Paladins, Fury Warriors, Arms Warriors, and Gladiator Warriors. So that's Patchwork. Okay, moving on to Grobbulus. Once again, this is the early phase 1 parses. Unholy DK number 1, Assassination Rogue number 2, and Affliction Warlock number 3. And here we have late phase 1. And would you just look how big of a jump Unholy DK has gotten in late phase 1. They're absolutely dominating here. If you look at the parses, Affliction Warlocks are doing around, let's say, 8200 to 8300 DPS. And Unholy is doing, give or take, 1000 DPS more with the highest recorded DPS. It's a little small here, but almost 14,000 DPS, which is pretty nuts for still Naxxramas phase, like phase 1. It's pretty crazy. So Unholy DK stays number 1. Assassination Rogue went from 2 to 3, and they switched places with Affliction Warlock. Affliction Warlock's now number 2. Demonology stayed the same. Combat Rogue and Arcane Mage also switched places. So no major upsets here, no major changes. Frost DK went down a bit, 2 places though. The big loser once again though for this fight is Subtlety Rogues. They went down from 14 to 19. Once again, they dropped really hard. It was surprising to see them kind of doing okay-ish since they were seen as such a meme spec for PvE. They're mostly PvP. And they actually did okay-ish in early phase 1. They are now dropping off really hard based on these 2 boss fights. Moving on to Gluth or Gluth or whatever you pronounce it, I don't know. This is the old parse that we had. Unholy DK number 1, Assassination Rogue number 2, and Demonology Warlock number 3. And here we have late phase 1. And once again, would you look at Unholy DK here, absolutely shattering the rest of the classes. It's not even funny anymore. Unholy does around an average of 9,800 DPS, and the second one, Assassination Rogue, is 8,200. So that is 1,600 DPS difference between number 1 and number 2, which is pretty nuts. So Unholy stays the same. Subtlety Rogue here, that went from 13 to 70. Once again, they are the big loser here, dropping off pretty damn hard. Survival Hunter came back a little bit though, from 16 to 14. Frost Mage moved up from 22 to 20, but again, it's just showing that Frost is not viable. And once again, this fight is showing just how poor the Retribution Paladins are doing, the Beast Mastery Hunters, and Arms Warriors and Fury Warriors, and of course Gladiator Warriors, all at the bottom. Then we go to Noth the Plaguebringer. This right here is early phase 1. We have Unholy still on top, and then the 2 Warlock specs number 2 and 3. And here we have late phase 1. So I don't know if you guys notice a trend here, but Unholy is really taking names in late phase 1. They're so far ahead of the number 2, number 3, number 4. They're not even close. It's a little bit ridiculous actually, but still, you know, it is what it is. Unholy has been first in early phase 1 and now they're first in late phase 1. Demonology and Affliction has switched places from 2 to 3. Arcane Mage, Assassination Rogue, Enhancement Shaman, and Combat have all stayed the same, so not much difference here. However, we have seen some changes here from Frost DK, which went from 8th to 11th position, so they dropped 3 positions. Survival went up 2 positions from 10 to 8. Marksmanship unfortunately dropped down a little bit from 12 to 14. And if you look a little lower, we see Fire actually moving up from 16 to 12, so they're now kind of in the middle, which is not too bad. Retribution Paladin fell off pretty hard. They were 17 and now they're 21, so they're way down at the bottom right now. Fury Warrior also fell off hard, Arms Warrior also, but in return Frost Mage, Beast Mastery Hunter and Subtlety Rogue moved up 3 spots. So there you go, that is what we have so far for Noth the Plaguebringer late phase 1. Then we move on to Thaddius, and once again this is early phase 1, and for a change we don't have Unholy DK dominating, it's Assassination Rogues that were dominating here, followed by Frost DK, not Unholy, and then the 3 Warlock specs. And then here we have late phase 1. And yes, Rogues are still dominating here. Unholy DK is way down at the bottom, but we'll go through the changes here a little bit more. So Assassination Rogue still number 1. Frost DK switched places with Affliction Warlock, so Frost is now 3 and Affliction number 2. Demonology Warlock unfortunately dropped off a bit here from 4 to 6. And Destruction actually moved up 1 spot, so they're number 4. A Combat Rogue moved up 1 spot. Unfortunately, Enhancement Shamans are the big losers here. They went from number 7 to number 10. So they went from kind of like the upper position to now kind of sitting at the middle. Fire Mage, however, has moved up. It's surprising how well Fire is doing right now in early Wrath Lich King, considering Fire usually is better much later in the game. Well, let's say ICC or TOC. But right now, yeah, number 7 is not too bad for the Fire Mages at all. Subtlety Rogue once again dropping a little bit. And we have Marksmanship Hunter moving up 2 positions. And for the rest, we have some slight changes, but nothing too drastic for Thaddius. Then we have Heigan the Unclean. We have Assassination and Combat Rogue on top, then followed by Demonology and Affliction, and then Frost DK. So this is early phase 1. And here we have late phase 1. So once again, the Unholy DK has moved up. And they are the big winners here. If you scroll down a little bit to here, if you scan, you see they moved up 6 positions. They made a giant comeback. They went from number 7 to number 1. So that is really impressive by the Unholy DK. Unfortunately, there's also been a lot of classes that have dropped off. Actually, a lot of changes here. So let's go through them. First of all, of course, Assassination went to number 2. Combat to number 4. Demonology went from 3 to 5. Frost DK losing a bunch of spots. They went from number 5 to number 8. And then Survival Hunter and Marksmanship Hunter, both kind of viable rating specs, if you will, because of course BM is more PvP focused. They've dropped off really hard. They both lost 5 positions from 8 to 13 and 9 to 14. However, Enhancement Shaman made a huge comeback. They made from 12 to 7th position, so they broke the top 10. Really impressive. And Subtlety Rogue also dropped off really hard. They dropped 7 positions. They went from 14 to 21, so yeah, once again proving that maybe early Wrath Subtlety might have been pretty okay-ish, if you will. But right now, yeah, you gotta spec Assassination or Combat. Other than that, we have Balanced Druid at number 11 right now. They went from 16 to 11. It's also a big win for the Balanced Druid. So both Druid specs doing pretty okay here when it comes to Heigan the Unclean. And another big winner was the Frost Mage. Surprisingly, they went from place 21 to 16. Which is still not amazing, but they're kind of moving up a little bit more to the middle, as opposed to the absolute bottom, where we still see our Gladiator Warriors, Arms Warriors, Subtlety Rogues, and Red Pallies. Then we move on to Loatheb, and this is once again early phase 1. We have Assassinations on 1, Demonology Warlock number 2, 3 Affliction Warlock, and of course Fire Mage on number 4. They do really well in this fight, so let's see how it is on late phase 1. And this is late phase 1 for you. Assassination Rogue still on top, so the Unholy DK is nowhere to be seen in the top 10. They are kind of in the middle here, but we do have Affliction Warlock and Fire Mages that have kind of traded place a little bit. Fire is now in the top 3, which is pretty unusual for early Wrath Lich King. But again, you know, this is Loatheb with the Spore mechanic. They get a lot of crit, and they're really able to shine here. So that's why they're really high up there. We don't see any huge changes here. Destruction actually moved up from number 9 to number 7. So that's a pretty significant jump. Once again, showing that Destruction is actually a pretty good spec for PvE. So if you like big fat crits and you like Chaos Bolt, hey, you can actually do okay as a Destruction Warlock as we look at these parses and as it shows. Also, Elemental Shaman moved up a little bit here. They went from number 16 to 14. So they're kind of now a little bit below average. They're doing a little bit better. Let's see how they are moving forward in these phases, because Elementals generally don't stack very well the more gear we get. And they also get kind of, you know, lost in the dust when we move to later Wrath, where a class like the Fury Warrior and the Fire Mage will just shine way more. But we will see. For the rest, we don't have any major changes, just a few positions here and there. No drastic changes here when it comes to Loatheb. Then we have Anub'Rekhan, once again showing you guys early phase 1, Unholy DK dominating. Then we have Demonology Warlock and Enhancement Shaman on number 3. And then here we have late phase 1, and would you look at that, Unholy DK, absolute domination once again by the Death Knights here. They stay on the number 1 spot. They have once again completely out DPS'd anyone here. They are doing a give or take 1600 DPS more than the number 2. So they are just crazy. If you want to just rock the damage meters right now, you better play an Unholy DK. They're just absolutely dominating. For the rest, we don't see any major changes when it comes to this fight, apart from a few. We have Frost DK that dropped off actually pretty significantly. They went from number 6 to number 11, so that's a pretty big drop off. Survival moved up a bit. We have Elemental Shaman that dropped off from 9 to 12. And we have a few classes trading places. Arcane Mage actually made a good comeback. They went from number 13 to number 9. So they poked the top 10 here. And for the rest, we don't have any big major changes. Once again, the bottom is still made up from Gladiator Warriors, Subtleties Rogues, Frost Mages, and BM Hunters. Has to be said that usually Retribution Paladins are also at the bottom. But here, they're doing okay-ish. They're, you know, like a little bit below average. They're not doing great, but they're not like number 20 or 21 or 22 at least. So doing a little better, but still not amazing. Then we have Grand Widow Faerlina. Once again, here is early phase 1, Unholy DK once again dominating, Combat Rogue number 2 and Demonology Warlock number 3. And here we have late phase 1 with Unholy once again making a bigger jump between early and late phase 1. They are doing almost about 800 DPS more than number 2, which is Combat Rogue this time. And pretty interesting here, the complete top 6 here is unchanged. No changes here in the top 6. And then you get to number 7, which is Frost DK, and they fell off really hard once again. They are losing so many battles actually. It's not a great time to be a Frost DK, and if you compare them from early to late Wrath, they're doing worse and worse. We'll see how it goes in Ulduar, but for now you can see they went from number 7 to number 12, so that's a pretty significant drop off. Also, unfortunately, Balanced Druids. I'm a big fan of the Balanced Druids. They went from number 8 to 11. But in return, Arcane Mages moved up from 10 to 7. And we also see Marksmanship Hunters poking the top 10 from moving from 12. BM Hunters from 18 to 16. I actually had this red, but it should be green because they moved up. Sorry about that. Subtlety Rogues dropped off. They went from 19 to 22. And Frost Mages, I mean, it's not really that relevant, but they went from 22 to 19. So they moved up a little bit, but they're still way, way down at the bottom. Then we have the big spider boss, Maexxna or whatever you want to call it. This is early phase 1, Unholy DK, big domination here. They were doing about 1000 DPS more than the number 2, which is Assassination Rogue, followed by Combat Rogue. So this is early phase 1. And here we have late phase 1. And would you just look at the difference? This is probably one of the biggest differences. It's just that red bar is just insane. Look at that. They are doing, give or take, 2000 DPS more. And this is the 99th percentile, of course, but they're doing 2000 DPS more on average compared to the number 2, which is just, once again, insane. So Unholy stays at number 1. Assassination and Combat also unchanged, so the top 3 is still the same. Demonology dropped off 1 position. We have Enhancement Shaman that dropped off 2 positions. Affliction actually moved up. They went from 6 to 4. Other than that, we don't really have any major changes when it comes to this fight. No drastic changes other than just, you know, the absolute domination from the Unholy DK and just the difference between number 1 and number 2. It's pretty crazy. Then we have Instructor Razuvious, early phase 1, Unholy DK on top, followed by the 2 Warlock specs. So this is early phase 1. And here we have late phase 1, and yeah, do you guys notice a trend here? Once again, Unholy DK absolutely dominating here. They're doing 900 DPS more on average when it comes to the number 2, which is Affliction Warlock and Demonology Warlock. Actually, the top 4 is unchanged, so it's still the same. And when we move down a little bit later down the line, we see Frost DK once again dropping pretty hard. They went from number 7 to number 11. We have Destruction and Balance Druid moving up a little bit, which is nice because, you know, I'm a sucker for the Balance Druid class, so it's nice to see them poking the top 10 here, cracking into the top 10. And other than that, we don't have any major changes. We have Frost Mage moving up once again. I mean, it's not really that significant, but they're number 16, so it's kind of interesting how Frost Mage is just seen as a pure PvP spec. And Retribution Paladin, I mean, it can be seen as a PvP spec too, of course, but that's supposed to be like a legit PvE spec, if you will. And Frost Mage are doing significantly better than Retribution Paladins, which was actually brought up that Retribution Paladins were not doing that great. But then again, they'll do much better probably in late Wrath. But for now, yeah, they're way at the bottom. And Shadow Priest moved up from 21 to 19, not really that interesting, but there you go. Other than that, no major changes, and that is Instructor Razuvious. That is Gothik the Harvester, early phase 1. We have Demonology Warlock dominating. Actually pretty interesting to see. Frost DK, not Unholy DK, they're actually number 2. Survival Hunter number 3. And we have Enhancement Shaman and Balance Druid making up 4 and 5. So a pretty drastic change when you compare the other fights. When usually it's Unholy DK or the Warlock specs or Rogues. This is really a fight where some other specs really shine. And here we have late phase 1, and for the first time ever, Hunters are leading. You can see that right there. Survival Hunter makes up the number 1 spot, which is really cool because they went from number 3 to number 1, so they were actually pretty close, but now they're dominating. And maybe not dominating because, you know, Demonology Warlock is admittedly pretty close. But it's nice to see Hunters on top and have a fight where they can really shine, as opposed to every single fight dominated by Unholy DK. And it's also pretty cool to see that Retribution Paladins also have a fight where they can do really well, probably because it's more cleave oriented. But yeah, let's go through some changes that we've seen from early to late phase 1. So, like I said, we have Survival Hunter. There's a few minor drop-offs here until you get to Beast Mastery Hunter, which was number 8. So they're actually not doing too bad in early phase 1 to now number 14. So they dropped off 6 positions, which is pretty significant here. They dropped off pretty hard. In return, though, Marksmanship has been doing way better. They moved from 14 to 9, so a big jump there. Shadow Priest also from 11 to 8. So it's also a pretty good fight where Shadow Priests were able to do some decent damage, able to crack the top 10 here. And then another pretty nice change here for the poor Fury Warriors. Look at that, they went from number 15 to number 11. So not amazing, they're kind of in the middle in this fight. But you know what, compared to before where they were number 15 and now they're number 11, they made a pretty significant jump when it comes to the position. Other than that, we have some minor changes, but nothing too major. So there you go, that is Gothik the Harvester. Then we have the 4 Horsemen. We have Demonology Warlock on top, followed by Unholy Death Knight and Enhancement Shaman number 3 when it comes to early phase 1. And here we have late phase 1 where the Unholy DK, once again, they're absolutely dominating here. There is about 800 DPS difference between number 1 and number 2. Number 2 being Enhancement Shaman. I have kind of a soft spot for Enhancement Shamans or just Shamans in general, so it's kind of cool to see them rocking the number 2 spot. We have Demonology Warlock number 3 and Affliction number 4. We don't see any huge changes when it comes to the top 10. We see some positions where they changed too, but it's really at the bottom where there are some bigger changes. Fury Warriors went from 16 to number 12. So once again, they went from kind of really below average to now kind of average. So no, you know, they're not rocking the DPS meters or anything, but they're able to kind of keep up with the rest, if you will. So that's kind of nice to see. We have Subtlety Rogue once again dropping off hard. They went from 17 to 20, so they're now way down at the bottom, as you can see. And we have Retribution Paladins and Arms Warriors actually moving up. I mean, they're still 17, 18, not really huge positions, but still, they're actually doing a little bit better versus some classes that really dropped off. So there you go. That is right now, late phase 1, the 4 Horsemen. Then we move on to Sapphiron. Both Warlock specs were dominating here. Affliction and Demonology, and Unholy DK was number 3. So that is early phase 1. And here we have late phase 1, and we see that Unholy DK once again has made it to the top. They are number 1. They went from 3 to 1. Demonology Warlock kind of dropped off a bit here. They went from number 1 to number 4. And Affliction Warlock actually stayed the same. So right now it seems that for this fight, Sapphiron, it seems Affliction is the better choice of the two. Other than that, we don't see any major changes in the top 10. That we have Balanced Druid going from number 10 to number 12. So it's a bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. We have Marksmanship Hunter losing 2 spots. Shadow Priest 3 spots. Fire Mage moved up a little bit now. They're kind of in the middle. And we have the big winner here on this fight when it comes to moving up, which is Elemental Shamans. They went from number 15 to now in the top 10. They're at number 10, so they're actually a little bit above average. So that is actually not too bad by the little Ellie Shamis here. I have a soft spot for Ellie Shamis, so that's really cool to see. Other than that, no major changes here, so that's pretty much Sapphiron for you guys. Okay, then we move on to the last boss fight of Naxxramas, which is early phase 1. We have Affliction and Demonology Warlock on number 1 and number 2. And then we have Assassination Rogue followed by both Unholy and Frost Death Knight. This is early phase 1. And here we have late phase 1, and we see Affliction still rocking the damage meters. They're still number 1, so for Kel'Thuzad, it really seems like of the 3 Warlock specs, which both are pretty good, they're still kind of in the top 10. Affliction really takes the cake here and is number 1 here. Other than that, we have some drop-offs and some minor changes here. Nothing too drastic. We have Demonology Warlock that went from number 2 to number 4. Unholy Death Knight moved up a little bit. Frost DK actually kind of dropped off kind of significantly. They went from number 5 to number 8. So that's a pretty major change. Enhancement Shaman moved up from 8 to 6. So they're doing a bit better here. Marksmanship Hunter dropped off. A little bit lower we have the Fire Mage making a good comeback from 15 to 12. And Shadow Priest dropping from 14 to 16. Other than that, no major changes. And actually from 17 to 23 there are no changes. So there you go. That is the individual fights. Now let's look at the overall damage. So over here we have early phase 1 with the tier list that was predicted to be in phase 1. And as you can see, it was kind of similar, if you will, but a lot has changed, and I tried to make at least an updated tier list of what it is right now in late phase 1. So let's have a look. And over here we have late phase 1, and actually some things have definitely changed in the tier list here. And this is right now what I consider to be the tier list when it comes to late phase 1. When you look at the parses, when you look at the overall damage of all classes and specs. So S tier is Unholy, Affliction, Demonology, and Assassination. So these 4 I consider to be S tier. Then right down there we have our A tiers, which I think are Enhancement Shaman, Combat Rogue, Arcane Mage, and of course the Survival Hunter. Then below that we have our B tiers, or maybe balance can be like a low A or a really high B, just depending who you ask. But for me, if I look at the parses, the B tier DPSers right now are Balanced Druids, Destruction Warlocks, Frost DKs, Fire Mages, and Elemental Shamans. And from there now we have C tier DPS, which is Marksmanship Hunters, Shadow Priest, and Feral Druids. And then we kind of see a pretty significant drop off here between Feral Druids and Fury Warriors. So I think really this is what D tier DPS is. So we have our Retribution Paladins, our Arms Warriors, Beast Mastery Hunters, Frost Mages, Red Pallies, and of course Subtlety Rogues. And of course way at the bottom we have Gladiator Warrior, but that's kind of like a mix between tank and DPS, so they're never going to be amazing. And of course the rest is all tank and heal. So there you go guys, we have seen some pretty major changes from the classes when we look at the parses, and I am very excited to see how this will move forward into Ulduar and see if we will still see absolute domination by the Unholy DK. People are saying that phase 2 Feral Druids are actually going to be really good. Let's see if that's actually the case. You never know, but you know what? Time will tell. Ulduar is pretty close around the corner, like I said. It's in PTR right now, and it's just going to be a matter of time before that will go live. And I can't wait to see what the parses will look like when that raid is released. But for now, I want to thank you for watching this video. I hope you guys liked the comparison. Hope it was a little bit clear to you guys. I tried to make it like short and snappy and a bit easy to see for you guys. I hope you liked it. So there you go. As always, I want to thank you for watching this video. I'm Hamsterwheel, and have a good one.